Kindred, happy Sunday. Let us pray. God of joy, bathed in glory, God of power, nurtured in the waters of Mary's womb, open the eyes of our hearts and send a word. Amen. Children are little conspiratorial creatures by nature. My daughter Jo is penning countless epistles to Santa Claus, and she's also learning to spell. So I have been drafted as her amanuensis, mainly spelling things out loud as she carefully writes them down. A beautiful dress for Mommy, a golden bone for Daisy Dog, and a bowl of peanut butter soup for Daddy. She's entranced by this conspiracy. Her and Santa Claus, who will together bring joy into other people's lives. And then she says, "And what do you want to ask in your letter to Santa, Daddy?" And it's been a rough year. I kind of bite my tongue. A vaccine, some common sense, adults in positions of political power. I tell her that I am really just looking forward to peanut butter soup. And she says, "It's just a bowl of peanut butter, Daddy." So, I guess that does kind of qualify as a soup. Maybe more like a stew. I don't know. She had her first cavity this past week. And so we've had to do some perilous traveling to dentists' offices. Her with her little mask and her little mouth pain. She's been so incredibly brave. And I think so much in this part of Advent about Mary, young Mary. In Luke's gospel, she accomplishes so much, so many things in preparation the birth of her son, Jesus. Now, the men in the early chapters of Luke, they're not exactly useless. They're skeptical. Yeah. For Joseph, this means that he trusts in a dream and follows directions. For Zechariah, as we spoke about last week, you need a little bit more encouragement. So the angel Gabriel strikes him mute for a while. Mary, though, is so wildly confident, I think, despite basically everything going against her. Her situation is extremely dire. And it's easy to forget that Mary is herself basically a child. She's 14 years old. What would we say about meeting somebody like Mary today in our city here in Kalamazoo? "Oh, Lord, baby's having babies." Or would it be something more judgmental? Mary's so brave, so confident, and she's undoubtedly, absolutely, the most faithful person in this journey toward Christmas. Despite the gravity of her situation, she travels to visit her cousin Elizabeth, her elderly cousin Elizabeth. Now, the gospel doesn't give us a great accounting for her motivation for making this journey. I think in our world today, we lack an understanding of why this might have been so important. Our families are different today in our context than they were in the time of the Gospels. Today in America, I'd say really since about the 1950s, our families have become atomized. I use this word on purpose. To be atomized means for something or someone or something else to be broken down into smaller and smaller pieces, to be scattered like droplets of perfume. The reason for this atomization is the cultural supremacy of something we call the nuclear family. The atomization of American families into nuclear families. That sounds very scientific. This is very modern. In our history and in cultures today, all around the world, children are not born simply to a mother and a father. They're born to a large, extended family where childcare is the work of many, many hands. Not just a mother and a father, but also older children and cousins and the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents and so many more, all living together in the household. And it's a very beautiful system for raising children. Now, it's a lousy system for selling houses, if that's what you're about. Today in the U.S., we prefer to have the children leave the house around the age of 18 or so, and then they're supposed to go and rent a house and get married, and then they'll buy a house, I suppose, fill it with kids. The work of child rearing today is then outsourced to public schools, and then grandparents are often removed to private care facilities. The pandemic has brought into stark relief the deficiencies in this system as the economy comes to a grinding halt because we lack the child care of public schools. But that was never the original purpose of public schools. And managed care facilities for older Americans are failing to meet the needs of people who are in danger from this epidemic. And I think that Mary travels to be with Elizabeth because that would be the normal course of behavior for someone who lived in a culture and a community where bringing children into the world was the work of many hands. She has foresight and faith. And when they meet, the Bible tells us that John leaps in Elizabeth's womb. This is the movement that we would call quickening. It's when, in the culture and time of the Gospels, a baby would begin to take on its own identity. Today, today we've got ultrasounds and sonograms and lab testing and everything else that goes along with this process that we call pregnancy. But before the modern day, there was very little to tell the world that a person was going to be having a baby. So this quickening, the movement of the child in the womb, was a deeply holy moment. I think it still is. It's when the baby sort of announces itself to the world. And John leaps in Elizabeth's womb. He knows the presence of God. He leaps. I like to think that he dances, like King David dancing before the throne of God. John like David, and Jesus as God. All right, now all of this happening is part of a grand conspiracy of faith between two women who are both in precarious situations. Remember that Mary's pregnancy is not okay with society. She became pregnant outside of marriage. But even today, do we welcome young pregnant women into our homes with open arms when they are pregnant outside of marriage? Do we celebrate their faith as her elder cousin Elizabeth celebrates Mary's? Or do we instead feel regret, perhaps shame, or maybe concern that this Mary, maybe she's too young, maybe she really doesn't know what's best for her and her baby? I also think about this in terms of these family systems that we've built for ourselves in America. How might life be different for young people who are pregnant outside of marriage if our households were intergenerational, diverse, and built on the lives of many, many people instead of just a single couple? Elizabeth doesn't shame Mary. She doesn't fret about what's to become of her and the baby. To the contrary, Mary and Elizabeth, they've got this beautiful back and forth with each other where they sort of outdo each other with words of blessing and praise and thanksgiving. Elizabeth exclaims, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child that you bear." Can we visualize ourselves saying the same to our own young cousins arriving pregnant with their fiancé in tow? Well, we say, maybe if I knew that she was pregnant with Jesus, I'd be excited. That's faith. Faith is what's required. And a little bit of foresight. 2 weeks ago, we spoke again about joy. And this Sunday is the Sunday of joy. We talked about how joy cannot be created. How, unlike happiness, We can't force joy. It's got to surprise us. It's got to overtake us. But we can cultivate an openness to joy, a certain posture that prepares faithfully for joy. And I think that that's exactly what Elizabeth has done here today. Despite everything that says on the surface that this is not a circumstance that calls for celebration, she has instead chosen a posture of joy. She sees with holy foresight that actually this is going to be a beautiful thing. Because babies are beautiful things in any circumstance. And while we might want to allow common sense or shame or whatever take the reins of this moment, we can instead have the foresight to choose a posture of joy and to trust God. Yeah? Faith is that first step. It requires faith to have the foresight to trust God. To choose to trust that God is actually at work in the world, rather than allowing our regularly scheduled litanies of what ifs and what abouts take control of our fearful hearts. It's easy to look out on the Marys and the Elizabeths of the world and say, that's just wildly impractical. That makes no sense. Or even, that's impossible. And it's harder then to have the faith and foresight to admit that we often don't have the answers, and that we cannot, in fact, predict the future with any kind of clarity, and that we are playing a role, in fact, in a story that is much, much larger than our own practical lives. The story of Christmas is, in fact, about many people conspiring to bring about a revolution in a way that the world has never seen before. It is a story of people of different generations, people of faith, of different ages, working together. It's a story of faith in the promises of God. It's a story of how God is faithful to us, and that God will go beyond our simple expectations, wildly beyond our expectations. It's a simple thing this week. I simply hope that we have the faith and foresight to trust in God. It's that simple trust that brought Mary to Elizabeth, that ignited the spark that would turn the world upside down. It is that simple trust that brings us back to Bethlehem every year. And it is wise to trust in God. Foresight that can take an entire lifetime to cultivate, but it's yours if you want it. Trust in God. Trust that God is at work in the world, and that we are, each of us, participating in this holy and wondrous miracle. Amen.